This episode is brought to you by Netflix. So Netflix is basically Santa this year. 2 NFL games on Christmas Day, streaming live. At 1 p.m. Eastern, it's Cowboys, Commanders. Then at 4:30, you've got Lions, Vikings. Midwest football, playoff stakes, and probably some snow. Watching holiday football is a tradition the whole family can enjoy. Open some gifts, grab some food, settle in, and watch NFL Live on Netflix this Christmas Day.
Alexandria, Louisiana, now known as one of the Trump administration's busiest, if not the busiest, deportation hub. There are many ICE flights going in and out of the airport there, taking people to detention facilities across Louisiana. This is where Rümeysa was taken.
After being surrounded by masked ICE agents on a quiet Somerville street the day before, Rümeysa Öztürk was now nearly 1,500 miles away.
And she didn't know what was going on. Suddenly, she arrives at this large detention facility in Basile, in a rural part of Louisiana, about 170 miles from New Orleans. It looked like this complex of warehouse-style buildings, surrounded by high chain-link fences topped with barbed wire. It's out there. It's in between crawfish ponds, and there's not that much around. So I can imagine it was really a shock for her to arrive there.
At this point, Massa is able to make contact with Rümeysa.
She was speechless. She was stunned. It was just incredibly difficult for her to kind of understand and grasp what had happened.
Rümeysa had been in transport since 5:15 the day before, and now this is almost the end of the next day, a quarter to 10 p.m., before she was able to talk to her lawyer, Massa Kambabi. Rümeysa had no idea who Massa was before that moment.
She didn't know she had had an attorney. And so she, I think, had this huge sense of relief that she wasn't just kind of lost in the system, but she wasn't getting medical care for hours and hours. And like, what's wrong with this system? What's going on here?
Boston Globe reporters Julia McDonald Nieto del Rio and Mark Arsenault continue the story here in an ICE detention processing center in Louisiana, a for-profit prison where Rümeysa would be held for nearly 6 weeks, though no criminal charges were filed against her. This is Rümeysa Öztürk, An American Story, Part 2. In the detention center in Basile, Rümeysa was cut off from the outside world, and yet also surrounded by the world. There were women from Asian countries, Latin American countries, African countries, European countries. All these women, like Rümeysa, had been caught up in the largest deportation effort in America's history, and now found themselves here, together, in detention. So Rümeysa had to adapt to a completely new reality pretty quickly.
Rümeysa had a tablet with an app that she could send messages on, but there's a limit to these messages, and the app wasn't reliable. She would especially message one of her former professors, now friend, Rayon Bilgay.
The first time she called, I was kind of surprised.
As we heard in episode 1, Rayon was one of the first people Julia spoke to the day after Rümeysa was taken.
I'm really, really stressed that she hasn't actually reached out to me.
When Rayon learned that Rümeysa had ended up hundreds of miles away in Louisiana, she felt an even bigger duty to help her.
When I talked to her the first time, that was so surreal because that's the first kind of call that I received from a collected phone. And the first thing she said that everything is recorded, by the way.
Yeah.
And I said, I have nothing to hide.
Yeah.
So have you? And she's like, yeah, of course.
Rümeysa wasn't able to message her family back in Turkey through this application because they were out of the country. So Rayon would really act as the go-between for Rümeysa and her family back in Turkey.
When they send a message, they send it to me and then I relay it to her just to let them know what's going on. And both parties are telling each other to feel safe and feel okay and not to worry about the other.
Oh.
And that, in a way, is really heartbreaking.
Live from Istanbul, he's Rümeysa's brother, Welcome to the program. What is the current situation with your sister Rumeysa, and have you been able to speak to her?
Right now, we have been able to reach her like just 1 to 2 minutes. Our lawyers are trying to reach her.
Rümeysa wrote that she shared the cell with about 23 other women, and the women really ended up leaning on each other for support because there is such little access to the outside world there.
I spoke to another detainee who was detained with Rümeysa in the same facility at the same time. Wendy Brito is a woman from El Salvador who was actually arrested on the very same day that Rümeysa was, on March 25th.
Marzo 25 de este año.
But Wendy comes from a very different circumstance.
¿Cuántos años ha vivido usted aquí en Estados Unidos?
Tengo 16 años.
Wow, muchos años. ¿Y es de El Salvador?
Wendy was married to a U.S. citizen and has 3 kids. She's lived in the U.S. for more than 15 years. Her kids were born here. She really built her whole life here and was seeking to regularize her status in the U.S.
En marzo de este año, yo llevé el documento donde había sido aprobado el asilo. Ya había tomado huella y ya solo estaba esperando lo demás.
She was living in the New Orleans area and was arrested by ICE at an appointment she had scheduled with the agency.
Luego simplemente me dijeron que entrara y quedara arrestada.
Wow.
And she was put inside this detention center.
Es un cuarto enorme, como con 80, 100 camas.
Julia spoke with her about what it was like every day there. And even though she was in a different area than Rümeysa was and didn't share space with Rümeysa, she did share some of the similar kind of concerns that Rümeysa did.
Wendy told me when she got the flu, for example, she wasn't given proper medical care.
Cuando caí enferma del flu, mis compañeras hablaron por mí y la oficial simplemente dijo, está bien, la vamos a llevar y nunca me llevaron a
la enfermería. ¿Nunca?
A la enfermería.
¿Le dieron alguna medicina o no?
No me dieron nada.
She also told me that they were often left without toilet paper.
Sí, muchas veces nos quedábamos sin papel de toilet. Algunas veces nos compartíamos entre las compañeras y a veces no, porque la mayoría no teníamos papel.
And something she said that really stayed with me was that a recurring sound that she would hear was the sounds of women crying and sobbing throughout the center.
Algunas lloran también, lloraban, la mayoría lloraban por sus niños.
Many of the women had kids, as she did, who they were missing, had a really hard time communicating with their family members.
Me invadía el miedo, pensé que iba a ser deportada, pensaba en mis hijos.
And Wendy's husband actually spoke to a local news outlet about how difficult it was at home with Wendy gone.
I just want a home. I need a home. And, if not for me, for the kids, I can hold on, but my kids need her.
Many of the women didn't know when they were going to be released or deported or transferred somewhere else.
Algunas tenían 6 meses o un año de estar allí.
She would spend a lot of her time just frankly feeling very depressed and anxious and in her bed. And she saw a lot of the other women go through that too.
And so did Rümeysa, who told her lawyers about what she and others were experiencing. She said that crying was a daily reality for these women.
These are women who were teachers, they were businesswomen, they have families, and they're subjected to these conditions that we heard Rümeysa talk about, lack of access to medical care, cramped conditions, all of the things that really make it so difficult to be detained. But they're also there for so long. And the length of the detention just really drives home how much of a punishment this is for all of these women.
While Rümeysa was cut off from easy communication to the outside world, her story blew up, and it started the day after her arrest.
Vote for one, face us all! Free Rümeysa, free them all! Vote for one, face us all! Free Rümeysa!
And the next day, Secretary of State Marco Rubio held a press conference, and a journalist from Reuters, Humaira Pamuk, asked why Rümeysa's visa was revoked.
Could you help us understand what the specific action she took led to her visa being revoked.
Yeah.
And what was your State Department's role in that process?
We revoked her visa. It's an F1 visa, I believe. We revoked it, and here's why. And I'll say it again. I said it everywhere. Let me be abundantly clear, okay? If you go apply for a visa right now, anywhere in the world, let me just send this message out. If you apply for a visa to enter the United States and be a student, and you tell us that the reason why you're coming to the United States is not just because you want to write op-eds, but because you want to participate in movements that are involved in doing things like vandalizing universities, harassing students, taking over buildings, creating a ruckus.
Without saying it directly, Marco Rubio associates Rumeysa's name and her visa cancellation with student activism that Rumeysa had no part in.
We're not going to give you a visa. If you lie to us and get a visa and then enter the United States and with that visa participate in that sort of activity, we're going to take away your visa. And once you've lost your visa, you're no longer legally in the United States, and we have a right, like every country in the world has a right, to remove you from our country. So it's just that simple. I think it's crazy. I think it's stupid for any country in the world to welcome people into their country that are going to go to your universities as visitors. They're visitors. And say, I'm going to your universities to start a riot. I'm going to your universities to take over a library and harass people. I don't care what movement you're involved in. Why would any country in the world allow people to come and disrupt? Now, we gave you a visa to come and study and get a degree, not to become a social activist that tears up our university campuses. And if we've given you a visa and then you decide to do that, we're going to take it away. I encourage every country to do that.
There was this sense that what happened to Rumeysa was a crossed line. I mean, people were really stunned by it, especially when it seemed like the reason she was detained was just because of an op-ed.
And 2 days later, there was a rally at Boston City Hall where Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell and Boston Mayor Michelle Wu made speeches that really spoke to that feeling.
I don't understand how anyone in Massachusetts or in this country can go about as business as usual when you witness something like that.
This moment is about Rumeysa, and this moment is about something larger and more fundamental. It's about all of us. Due process matters. Freedom matters. A society governed by laws matters. We are asking unthinkable questions about whether we still live in a democracy with rule of law, where we're protected for our individuality and our humanity, or if we are living in a time when bullying and intimidation are how our government operates.
But back on the Tufts campus, people were feeling uneasy while Rumeysa was still in detention.
Mark and I walked the campus to speak with some of the students, but most people didn't want to talk about it.
Talk about the chilling of free speech. It's, one arrest, and now all these people that we've run into today are afraid to talk.
It's definitely like the most no's I've gotten in a while on any assignment, even like pretty tough ones. So.
Yeah, people are just really afraid of making things worse for her, number one. And number two, people I think are afraid for themselves that they're going to be targeted if they appear anywhere in the media speaking out, which is what she did, which is what Rumeysa did. She appeared in the media speaking out on an issue, and now she's in detention in Louisiana.
Eventually, we did find some students who were willing to talk to us. One is an art student, and the other is an engineering student.
How did you feel in that moment seeing the video?
Off-put, yeah, completely. Especially I live right here, so it was right down the street. People are still worried about their friends on campus that are vulnerable, and especially it's not stopping. We see videos all over the city. I think that the fear has not died down at all.
I'm relatively close with a lot of international students, and even regardless of the video, just everything that's going on, visas just being randomly revoked, and I don't know, the abuse of power and just ignoring laws.
With each day that Rumeysa was in detention, pressure mounted. Weeks passed without the public seeing her at all, and people across the country worried about her well-being. And by now, her name started to represent something bigger, and national public figures were calling for her release. During this period, her ACLU lawyer, Jesse Rossman, waited for the government to provide any additional information that could explain why this was happening.
The reality and the shock continued to happen time and time again as more and more opportunities came up for the government to put anything forward that explained why this woman was being detained, and the silence was just deafening.
And then it was one day in April when Representatives Presley and McGovern and Senator Markey from Massachusetts, as well as some other representatives, go to visit the detention facility.
Upon arriving at Basile, we walked past security, and then we were taken to one of the dorms where I spent time with about 15 detainees.
One of the women said, "Some people think that even God has forgotten this place."
It was Wendy, Rümeysa, and one other woman who was pregnant, Wendy said, who ended up meeting with these representatives. Wendy had heard of Rümeysa because her husband had told her that, there's kind of a famous person inside the detention center, and it's Rümeysa. And this attention actually helped bring more eyes to what was going on inside the detention center and the conditions inside. And so her husband got in touch with a representative in Louisiana who was also coming to visit the detention center.
Nos llevaron a donde se reciben las llamadas de los abogados. Es como una oficina.
She told us they met in the room where detainees have phone calls with lawyers. And they asked them how they were doing, why they were detained, how they were being treated.
Nos preguntaron cómo fuimos detenida, por qué razón, cómo era el trato.
So I spoke with Ayanna Presley right after she left the detention facility in Basile.
The dorm space is all white. It's bunk beds. The detainees were all in a sort of orange scrubs, if you will. There's a color coding system where the colors indicate what level of a security threat you are. Red being the most, severe or extreme, blue being in the middle, and orange being low level.
And may I ask, what color was Rümeysa wearing?
Orange. She was in orange, and she was wearing the same hijab, a neutral color that she was wearing when it's sort of like a peach color that she was wearing when she was abducted. We originally thought we were just going to tour the space and not actually have an opportunity to interact with the women. But I was the only woman in the congressional delegation. And so when I walked in, they just sort of gravitated towards me and were just desperate and appealing and crying, and some were visibly shaking. It's been a physically and emotionally grueling day.
Yeah.
So I'm in the car, it's raining. The car has become this sort of, guerrilla work vehicle.
Oh,
so
my gosh.
Things are a little bit all over the place. So just bear with me here.
Ayanna Presley represents Somerville, which is where Rümeysa was arrested. And both Presley and Markey have been very outspoken. They condemned the administration's actions against international students and immigrants and brought increased scrutiny on ICE and the detention center in Basile. They pointed to claims of medical neglect and abuse that DHS and ICE have since explicitly denied. Though, Presley says, she heard of these issues straight from the detainees themselves, including Rümeysa.
The fact that she endured that and continues to experience a great many indignities, be denied religious accommodations. And she did share an account of a nurse removing her hijab and, waiting 3 days for toilet tissue and basic necessities.
In a statement later given to the Globe, DHS and ICE denied the allegations of inadequate religious accommodation or insufficient toilet paper, saying in part, quote, "The allegations of Ms. Öztürk's detainment are unequivocally false." They also stated they had no record of any nurse telling Rümeysa to remove her hijab, and said they had no record of any grievance being filed. They go on to say that from the moment that someone enters ICE custody, it is, quote, "a long-standing practice to provide comprehensive medical care."
But regardless of the conditions of detention, the fact that Rümeysa was still in detention with no way to know what would happen to her really weighed on her.
She greeted us and we all asked, can we hug? We told her how loved she is, how many people are concerned for her. And she shared that she's concerned for herself too. As we were leaving, she asked for us to pray for her and just kept saying, I'm afraid that something will happen to me and no one will be able to get to me or no one will even know.
And so this visit was the first time these representatives really saw the true severity of what it was like inside this detention facility, the mountain that the women would have to climb just to get a chance at freedom.
It was essential to go through it in order to bear witness to what we did today and to give amplification to it and visibility to it. Many of them have been waiting for months for a court date, have struggled to attain and to keep legal counsel. I mean, we understand in Louisiana, there are some 7,000 detainees and only 5 pro bono attorneys. There are lawyers that if you just say, I'm a detainee here, they'll say, if you were in Texas or someplace else, maybe I could actually, be helpful. They'll just hang up on you. We learned from them that many lawyers don't want to work with detainees in Louisiana or in Brazil specifically because it is some of the most punitive environments and some of the toughest laws. And of course, that's why they're brought here. I mean, Rumeysa went from Somerville to Atlanta to Louisiana. Mahmoud Khalil went from New York to New Jersey to Louisiana.
Seeing Rumeysa was important. All eyes were on this case. The momentum was still fresh, the shock still new. And yet, we had seen from another case, the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case, how attention can be a double-edged sword.
A battle of narratives is playing out regarding President Trump's immigration crackdown. While the White House is getting criticized for deporting a Maryland man to El Salvador, the administration...
Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a father and asylum seeker who was taken by ICE and deported to El Salvador to be imprisoned in the massive prison known as Secot. His case was one of the first that stayed in headlines week after week.
He was arrested by ICE in Baltimore March 12th.
He's been living in the United States for about 14 years.
He was then flown with other migrants to a notorious supermax prison in El Salvador.
The U.S. Supreme Court found his removal to be
The Trump
illegal.
administration admits it mistakenly deported Kilmar Abrego Garcia, resisting a Supreme Court order to facilitate the man's return to the U.S.
Senator Chris Van Hollen even making the trip over there to advocate for his release.
While Massachusetts lawmakers were allowed entry to the ICE facility in Basile, at the same time, lawmakers who flew down to El Salvador to speak to Kilmar were denied entry to the prison. And the outrage over what was happening to Kilmar seemed to push the Trump administration to double down.
Nothing will change the fact that Abrego Garcia will never be a Maryland father. He will never live in the United States of America again.
This kind of retaliation scared many people. But as a member of the House Oversight Committee, Ayanna Pressley felt a responsibility to see for herself what was happening to her constituent inside this detention center.
But I know in doing so that we could make them that much more vulnerable. And so I'm really struggling here because I want to do my job.
Yeah.
I want to be an efficient, effective pursuit of the truth. This is a fact-finding mission. And the facts that I found out, I will have many sleepless nights because I will be haunted by what I learned and because I will be up strategizing about what more do we need to do. We had entry and they gave us meaningful, confidential time with Rumeysa and the 2 other detainees she was with. There was no ICE representative there, so I do want to acknowledge that. That being said, we are on a fact-finding mission with the ranking member of Homeland Security. The facts that we found are damning. They are concerning, and they contradict a lot of what we were being told on the tours. We heard the stories about people's ability to access feminine hygiene products or, appropriate clothing for the winter months or living under extreme cold. They all spoke of how cold it is, how hard the beds are, how inedible the food is, and many of them have diarrhea or vomit because the food is so inedible.
After this visit, Representative Presley and McGovern and Senator Markey wrote an op-ed to the New York Times detailing what they had heard and saw at the ICE detention center. And then, DHS responded, saying in part that it, quote, rejects the false narrative that individuals in our custody are denied access to adequate medical care or nutritious food. They said that these claims are misleading and undermine public trust.
It is unconscionable and unlawful. What has happened to Rümeysa Öztürk, what has happened to Mahmoud Khalil, what has happened to the 200 plus students who have had their visas revoked, who have been denied due process, who have committed no crime. Any person of conscience who calls this country home should be unnerved, should be upset about what is happening in this country.
After the break, we turn the clock back to January 21st, the first day of President Trump's second term, to understand how decisions made that day led to Rumeysa's arrest. And then, what happened when those decisions and their consequences wound their way through the court system.
Say hello to the all-new Alexa Plus and see how Alexa can do so much more for you. Need tickets to see your favorite artist? Craving your comfort restaurant? Just sit back, relax, and talk naturally. Alexa's on it. It learns your style, anticipates what's next, and makes it happen across Echo, Fire TV, and more. Learn more at amazon.com/new Alexa.
Looking for the perfect gift? Blink has you covered. With a Blink security camera, you're giving the gift of peace of mind.
A camera? Isn't that hard for them to set up?
It's simple to install anywhere, and they'll always know what's happening at home.
Okay, that's actually perfect.
Perfect indeed. Give the gift of smart security with Blink so they can check in on home from anywhere this holiday season. Shop now at amazon.com/blink.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Carvana lets you buy your next car on your terms. Explore a massive inventory online, filter for what matters, and find your perfect match. Then choose delivery to your home or pick it up at one of Carvana's iconic car vending machines. Every car also comes with a 7-day money-back guarantee, so you can make sure it's the right fit. Buy your car on Carvana. Delivery or pickup fees may apply. Limitations and exclusions may apply. See our 7-day return policy at Carvana.com.
Carvana.
President Donald Trump in the Oval Office after being sworn in as the President of the United States.
President Trump began his second term by signing a number of executive orders.
That list is a long one. So many things happening all at once in so many different directions.
One of those executive orders, number 14188, called Additional Measures to Combat Anti-Semitism, targets certain students who participated in pro-Palestinian protests on college campuses. The order specifically targets non-citizens who could now face deportation. In a statement, President Trump said, quote, "To all the resident aliens who joined in the pro-jihadist protests, we put you on notice. Come 2025, we will find you, and we will deport you." Mark Arsenault uncovered how this executive order trickled down through federal departments to be executed.
So in early March 2025, some of the Trump administration's high-ranking law enforcement people in Homeland Security met privately to figure out how to carry out the president's executive orders purportedly targeting anti-Semitism and people protesting on college campuses for the Palestinian cause. So the stars of this meeting were sort of the analysts. These were people who worked for Homeland Security investigations who, as their own boss called them, are like the nerds of law enforcement who are skilled at internet searches and digging up information at people. And so Homeland Security officials came up with an unprecedented plan to try to vet people who were here as international students who may have participated in
demonstrations and looking for, some reason why they shouldn't have a visa. Well, they created what they called a tiger team to vet these thousands of names and come up with people whom the government could take action against for their pro-Palestinian activism. So Peter Hatch is the director of Homeland Security Investigations Office of Intelligence. He's the guy who is in charge of those, as he called them, nerds. The government decided to use Hatch's army of nerds to scrub all the names on the Canary Mission website, figuring, hey, that much work had already been done. If we want leads, let's use Canary Mission, which is sort of a shadowy website. It's been around for about 10 years.
Canary Mission didn't respond to our requests for comment, but their goals are pretty clear in this introduction video from 2015.
We are Canary Mission, an organization dedicated to documenting these acts of hate, exposing them, and holding these individuals accountable.
So it aspires to be a blacklist where people are able to report their coworkers, their friends, their classmates, their professors.
It is your duty to ensure that today's radicals are not tomorrow's employees.
And with the Homeland Security officials, they were instructed to take the names off of Canary Mission. Just scrape those names since that work had sort of already been done. And then from that, build cases and files against people for, potential revocation of their visas.
There was not much in the file for Rumeysa. Once the file was put together, it included her Canary Mission profile and a link to her op-ed, which, in addition to criticizing the Tufts administration, also criticized the Israeli government and mentioned, quote, deliberate starvation and indiscriminate slaughter of Palestinian civilians and plausible genocide, end quote. The file on Rumeysa had included a Boston.com story about this other group that had been suspended by Tufts for its behavior, a group that Rumeysa was not a part of, and there's no accusation that she had participated in any of the activities that got the group suspended.
But because the group and Rumeysa both supported the same set of resolutions from the Student Senate, the government inferred an association. So the file eventually lands with this guy named John Armstrong, who is the State Department's most senior official in the Bureau of Consular Affairs. The summary memo that Armstrong received in the file said that the investigators had not provided any evidence that Öztürk had engaged in anti-Semitic activity or made any public statements that indicated support for Hamas. Armstrong, on the document, actually wrote actions, not words. And so in his thinking, it was not what Rumeysa said in her op-ed, but it was this implied association with this other group. She supported the same set of resolutions that this group had. And from that, the government inferred an association. So Armstrong made the decision to revoke Rumeysa's visa. And on March 21st, it was revoked silently. She wasn't told her visa was revoked, and they made it a priority to arrest her. And 4 days later, officers were waiting for her. At least 7 people were involved in staking her out.
Mark got access to hours of video from the camera that had captured her arrest. After downloading hundreds of files and combing through them minute by minute, Mark was able to piece together the amount of time and effort the ICE agents spent on capturing Rumeysa.
What I wanted to know is, how long had they been waiting there? We start with this one, 5:44 a.m., March 25th. And this is the first ICE agents arriving. Still dark out. 5:50 in the morning. So this is 6 minutes later. This is the second guy. This is the SUV. 8:13 a.m. Check coat guy in the silver Charger is back. 9:40 a.m. Now it's the other guy's turn because he leaves here. 10:25 a.m. The silver Charger is still there. He's been sort of by himself now for about 45 minutes. At 3:52, the second SUV comes down Electric Avenue and gets in position, and that's the car that they will actually take Rümeysa away in. They were out there waiting for her for 12 hours.
We all saw the film of her arrest, which resonated with events in Europe in the 30s to people of my generation.
Victor Kovner is a First Amendment lawyer who was at work when two of his partners came into his office.
And then we saw that the justification given for the arrest was part of this bogus opposition to anti-Semitism. Many of us in our office, we found it intolerable that this happened in the United States and the excuse was fighting anti-Semitism. That was a lie, a deliberate falsehood. It needed some response.
Victor and his colleagues decided to submit an amicus brief, a type of legal brief, which means friend of the court in Latin. Experts or affected groups may submit their knowledge or arguments to a court for additional consideration this way.
We wanted the courts to see that there were at least many in the Jewish community who were outraged and deeply opposed to what was happening, supposedly in their name. That made it so offensive. One does not fight anti-Semitism because a graduate student from Turkey writes an article critical of the Israeli government. That is not evidence of anti-Semitism. And so we needed to weigh in, not for ourselves, although also for ourselves, of course, but for the Jewish community, which is why we tried to address it in this brief from 27 Jewish organizations around the country in synagogues.
By April 10th, Rümeysa had been in detention for about 2 weeks, and in that time, her legal defense was reinforced with ACLU lawyers, immigration lawyers, advocates, and now with Victor and his team of colleagues, along with the Jewish organizations in the amicus brief. But her legal case had become complex. Soon, her attorneys found themselves fighting legal battles on several fronts. On one hand, there was the issue of Rümeysa's immigration status. Rümeysa was in the U.S. on an F-1 student visa. When the government revoked that visa without telling her, and later produced a notice for her to appear before an immigration court, they initiated deportation proceedings against her. This meant that the federal government was starting a case to try to force her out of the United States. But then, there's also the issue of how Rümeysa was detained and transferred. When Rümeysa was arrested and taken across state lines, her lawyer, Massa Kimbabi, filed a habeas corpus petition. Habeas corpus is a constitutional right that allows people to challenge in federal court their detention by the government. Was it legal to detain Rümeysa all because of an op-ed and the associations inferred because of that op-ed? And when the Massachusetts judge ordered that Rümeysa was not to be taken out of state following the filing of her habeas petition, was it legal that ICE continued to hold her in detention and transfer her to Louisiana? These would be the issues litigated in federal court, not in immigration court. And even more complicated, which courts took precedence on deciding these questions mattered a lot. This was another legal battlefront, because the court jurisdictions where these issues would be decided would make a huge difference to the outcome of Rümeysa's case. To Victor, it seemed obvious why the government might want Rümeysa's case to be litigated quickly in Louisiana.
You have a number of very conservative members of the federal judiciary, particularly in those states, Louisiana and Texas. The question is, what weight would an immigration court or a court in Louisiana give to our First Amendment arguments? They're just as good there, but immigration judges do not have life tenure. They're more susceptible to government control, and some have been laid off. They don't have the independence and strength and fortitude that federal district court judges do.
But in federal court, especially one in the Northeast, where her habeas petition was filed, the reason for her detention and how she was detained would be scrutinized by a lifetime-appointed federal judge.
Was her detention justified or was it unconstitutional? And that turns on the First Amendment issue. That's our strongest issue of all these cases in the nation. Rümeysa is the strongest the outrage of the conduct here is most clear and blatant. It's so dramatic. The underlying action, taking away her visa, was itself violative of the First Amendment and the Constitution. And if there were no habeas proceeding, that would be heard in an immigration court, and it wouldn't come before a federal district court judge with life tenure.
So that night, when Massa Kambabi was scrambling to file the habeas petition, the fact that she got it in so quickly made all the difference. By 10:55 p.m. that night, a federal judge ruled that Rümeysa could not be taken out of state. But the judge didn't know she was already gone. So her location at the time of that ruling became the state where her case would be heard, the District of Vermont. So through the next few weeks of April, this sort of complex web of legal issues were woven through the courts in Vermont, in Louisiana, and then by the beginning of May, it wove its way all the way to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. So Julia went down to New York, and the morning of May 6th, she got up early to go to the courthouse. There were 48 seats for people who wanted to come watch the proceedings, and she was lucky to get one.
Today is Tuesday, May 6th. We're outside of the courthouse here in downtown Manhattan in front of Foley Square, where Rümeysa Öztürk's hearing in front of the Second District Court of Appeals was just heard, and arguments, her lawyers just presented arguments in front of the appeals judges.
This hearing would determine what legal venue and order Rümeysa's case would be heard. If this panel of federal judges from the Second Circuit decided in favor of the government, it would likely mean Rümeysa's case would be heard in an immigration court, probably in Louisiana. If it chose to reject the government's appeal and rule in favor of Rümeysa's side, the District of Vermont would be the venue where Rümeysa's case would take priority, specifically on the question of why she was taken off the streets in the first place, and address the First Amendment issues with that. So, there was a lot riding on this hearing.
Everyone was really attentive. The judges were very attentive as well. They often stopped the attorneys to ask them questions about their arguments. It'll be interesting as Friday, Rümeysa is supposed to have a bail hearing in Vermont, and basically we're figuring out, this is to see whether or not she will be transferred to Vermont before that bail hearing, which remains unclear.
While Julia was inside the courthouse watching the arguments, outside the courthouse, there was a crowd gathering.
Hands off Rümeysa now! Hands off Rümeysa now!
It had been 6 weeks since Rümeysa was arrested, and still protests were happening, specifically on her behalf.
We want justice, you say how?
Free Rümeysa right now!
Rümeysa's story brought up deeply held feelings.
This is despotism. It is so upsetting that this is our country and that this is what America has become.
This case will, if left unchallenged, affect the rights of everyone.
They're abusing their power and they're denying freedoms and liberties. This is horrific, what is happening.
And the government is not allowed to punish dissent. That way lies tyranny.
There is a court of law. There is a judicial process.
If she can be in prison for co-authoring an op-ed in a student newspaper, this sort of draconian, cruel, abusive, unlawful tactics could be done to anyone.
That could happen to any of us. We have a constitution that is designed to protect those rights, to protect those liberties. And our government officials have sworn oaths to uphold that Constitution.
As a student in the department that I'm a student at Tufts University, and I'm hoping to show up for her. There's no reason to be detained and or deported for having an opinion. This is an attack on all of us, immigrant or not. Everybody has the right to express their opinion, and it's a student newspaper. That's, kind of the whole point of a newspaper.
It's very important. This is like human rights. I see my country is going down with all these things, because just because you write in something or you say something right, you get arrested. This is not right. We're looking for justice and to live in peace. We live in a freedom country.
the court hearing was over pretty quickly, even though this court session heard arguments concerning Rumeysa's case and another similar case of a Columbia University student, Mohsen Mawdawi. Both cases were sort of lumped together here, and yet, still, it didn't take long to hear the arguments.
There was only one lawyer for the government, and then several lawyers, both for Rümeysa Öztürk and Mohsen Mawdawi. Both individuals had their hearings in front of the appellate judges today.
After the hearing, Julia caught up with one of Rumeysa's attorneys, Esha Bandari.
We feel good about how it went today. We think the court recognizes the urgency of the issue. We're hopeful that the court will allow Rumeysa to be returned to Vermont so that she can be present in court for her bail motion and for her habeas merits hearing on the 22nd.
I want to thank everyone for coming out here in the rain. We know that being out here every day, it's tough.
So I think, it's going to be an important week for the case, and we're going to see how things develop over the next few days. But yeah, for now, they're hoping that she can be transferred to Vermont by Friday. But the government is arguing basically that the district court there doesn't have jurisdiction over making that decision, and therefore she should be kept in detention in Louisiana. So we'll see what develops.
Wednesday, May 7th, the next day, the Second Circuit Court decided against the government and denied their appeal. The government was ordered to comply with the District of Vermont's transfer order within 1 week. And then, on Thursday, May 8th, the court in Vermont decided that Rumeysa's bail hearing could be held remotely and didn't have to wait for the government to transfer Rümeysa. She could join the hearing by a video link from inside the detention center. The bail hearing was set for Friday, May 9th. So Massa Kambabi rushed to be with her client, Rumeysa, for the hearing.
I basically just bought a ticket last minute and ran over to Logan Airport, and really looking forward to having her case heard today.
Julia also caught a last-minute flight to Louisiana and met up with Massa the morning of the bail hearing.
This is my second time coming here to see her. The first time was for her first immigration court hearing. And it's telling that, Geo Group and these other for-profit prisons are setting up in places that are really difficult for people to get to. I mean, we're in a small town known for its crawfish farming. I mean, it's extraordinary that the lengths that the government went to basically disappear her all the way down here in Louisiana. It makes the detainees feel isolated. And I think it's part of the strategy of trying to break them down so that they beg and plead to be deported so that they're not stuck in prison for a day longer than they need to be. It's really draining and difficult, but she's really strong. And so I'm so proud of her for how she's been holding up under these circumstances, and really also just trying to uplift all of the other women with her in the facility.
While Julia prepared to wait outside the detention facility, Mark Arsenault was about 1,700 miles away in Burlington, Vermont, where the bail hearing would be heard in person.
I'm in a hotel in Burlington. It's 5:30 in the morning on May 9th, the day that Rümeysa Öztürk is supposed to get her bail hearing. It's going to be a little strange today because Julia, my partner, is in Louisiana, where Öztürk will be zooming in to the meeting from detention. And we are expecting protests on her behalf at both locations.
Folks, let's gather up in the street.
May I talk to you? I'm Mark Arsenault from the Boston Globe. So, could you tell me who you are and why you're here?
I'm Candace Pratt, and I believe in the rule of law and due process. And I just was in a murder trial as a juror for 5 weeks here at this courthouse. And the defendant was found guilty, but the victim was apprehended by the murderer, and he was masked and had a fake ID as being a U.S. Marshal in an old cop car, and took him away in handcuffs, shot him in the back many times, and murdered him. Here in Vermont, that happened.
Wow.
So, masked people picking up someone off the street doesn't bode well for me.
Right. And did you make this sign?
Yes, I did.
What is it? It's just rule of law, right?
So Mark and Julia were both out in the rain talking to protesters. One protester Julia talked to felt compelled to show that not all people in Louisiana agreed with what was happening there in Basile.
It can be very easy to kind of scapegoat Louisiana or like it's a deep red state, but there are plenty of people here in the Deep South who are absolutely fighting for justice and fighting for what's right. And I am happy to be out here as one of them.
And then the bail hearing had begun in Vermont.
I managed to get into the courtroom. It's a very small courtroom. It's a weird space. It's a long, narrow space. So it feels like when you're in the gallery that you're sort of a mile away from the judge on the other side of the room. And in the courtroom, it felt really, really quiet as people realized the graveness of this situation. The only sound you could hear for large portions of this before the hearing really got started was sort of the scratch of that chalk from the sketch artists. When she appeared for the first time in that video screen, a lot of friends of hers who were in the gallery gasped because it was really the first time that they had seen her. I sat next to the court artist and I watched him throughout the proceeding as he was drawing Rümeysa on this big sheet of cardboard with pastels. Rümeysa simply argued her detention should not stand because it was related to free speech. Her detention was deteriorating her health because she was suffering asthma attacks because she was unable to really control her environment, which is an important part of mitigating her asthma, and that she was not a flight risk, she was not a danger to the community, and she deserved bail so that she may rejoin her community at Tufts and continue her studies, which the United States had originally approved her to do. So the government's case was that this didn't belong in this court at all. They had lost that ruling, but they did bring it up again. They had argued that the original habeas petition never said Vermont. That's where her custodian was based. And there's a lot of rules around these petitions. It's very important to identify the custodian of a person in habeas, but sometimes that's not known. In this case, it wasn't known. And the judge says, well, you can't hide that information and then use the fact that the defense attorney doesn't have it in order to argue that the petition was improperly filed. The government was, in this hearing, I think, resigned to the fact that they were not going to win it, realizing that, this was not the venue that they were going to win in.
Rumeysa's lawyers felt heartened by the decision back in New York and hopeful that the judge in Vermont would rule in their favor. But in the days and hours leading up to this hearing, they wondered if there was some kind of last piece of evidence or argument that the government could provide that would diminish their chances.
The judge in the District of Vermont had asked for sort of final papers, right, pens down for evidence with respect to the bail hearing the week before we had the hearing itself. And we got our papers in at 11:57, 3 minutes before the deadline. We were in under the wire and we're like, oh, I guess the government also is going to be submitting right under the wire. And then nothing. It was shocking. It continues to shock me.
When Judge Sessions finally spoke, he agreed that there were, in his words, quote, very substantial claims of both due process and First Amendment violations. He recognized that if Rumeysa's detention were to stand, it would chill the speech of millions of non-citizens. And then he ruled that Rümeysa should be set free on bail immediately. Back in Louisiana, Massa and Rumeysa hugged. And outside the detention center, even though it had been raining, there was a break in the clouds, and the sun came out.
Heard some cheers when the news was announced that Rümeysa was going to be released on bail. Everyone is in good spirits.
Rümeysa, we love you! We love you! We love you, Rümeysa!
It was around 5:15 p.m. Rümeysa walked out of the center in a pink blouse and tan pants. clothes that Massa had brought her from Boston.
We are so glad you're
finally free. How do you feel? Please tell us.
Thank you so much for being here, especially women folks. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for all the support and love. I am a little bit tired, so I will take some rest, but I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for all the support and love.
Rümeysa, we love you!
I love you, babe. Thank you for all the care and love.
Your 509 family loves you!
I love my Union folks and siblings. Thank you so much for all the support. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Safe travels home.
It's 5:21. Rümeysa just came out of the detention center. I'm shaking a little bit. We've been waiting all day for this, almost 9 hours out here. It's been a day. Oh, here she comes in her attorney's car. They're leaving the detention center fully. So, she's waving at everyone and saying goodbye. Wow. Must be a really, really special day for her. And ooh, I'm getting a little emotional, but it's just to see her smile and even come over and acknowledge people who are here. I think after spending 6 weeks inside, I can't imagine what it must feel like. It's been quite a day.
Rumeysa was formally released from the ICE detention center in Basile and returned to Boston the following day. She resumed her studies at Tufts and continues to work on her thesis about how young people and children use social media in pro-social ways. Meanwhile, her case is still ongoing. The government is still trying to deport her. Wendy Brito, the woman who was detained the same day that Rümeysa was released in early May. While she was in detention, her husband was diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer. He died just a few weeks after she was released. Meanwhile, there are still many women in detention in Basile. Öztürk's story has become a test for America because it is bigger than any one episode or any individual. It is about American ideals, including free expression and the rule of law, about the promises a nation makes and the promises it breaks. Rümeysa Öztürk, An American Story, is reported by Julia McDonnell Nieto de Rio and Mark Arsenault, with additional reporting by Samantha J. Gross, Camilo Fonseca, Jasmine Aguilera, Kristen Nelson, and Julia Patero. This episode was written by Jasmine Aguilera and Julia McDonnell Nieto de Rio, produced and sound designed by Jasmine Aguilera, edited by Kristen Nelson, with additional editing by Francis Storrs and Lisa Wangsness. Our sound engineer is Uzair Ahmed. Special thanks to Ryan Huddle.
Hi, it's Reese Gorman, congressional reporter and host of the brand new podcast On Notice. This is the new podcast from Notice, the nonpartisan newsroom covering politics and policy in Washington, D.C. Each week, I'll bring you real conversations with members of Congress and those who make the Hill run. And it's packed into just 30 minutes, so you can learn a lot without taking too much time out of your busy day. Join me for On Notice. That's Notice spelled Notus. Available every Monday wherever you get your podcast or on YouTube.